Again, the subject of this talk is American Catholic Patrimony and Ecclesiology for Contemporary Sacred Music. Ecclesiology means the study or the theology of the church. And the purpose of this talk is to lay out where there is currently a gap in the church's sacred music landscape and to detail Angelico Sacred Music's response to that gap. And to do this, I want to expand upon two identities of ours, as Americans and as Catholics, to contextualize this mission. Let's first hit the American aspect. American exceptionalism is a principle we kind of take for granted today, that America excels in sports, in business, in the sciences. Yet in the mind of the church, America's powerful prevalence and even its existence is a relatively new phenomenon. Because as you may have heard before, the church does not think in news cycles or months or even years. The church thinks in centuries. Last century, one of the more popular Catholic novels written was Willa Cather's Death Comes for the Archbishop. It details the beginnings of the Catholic Church in the American Southwest Diocese of Santa Fe, which covered a vast swath of the country, including here in Phoenix. And the story opens in 1848 with a group of cardinals in Italy discussing the new diocese. But American exceptionalism is far from the principle and framework they have in mind. Quite the contrary. Speaking of America in general and of the desert Southwest in particular, one of the clerics laments, "Nothing ever comes from over there but trouble and appeals for money." Nothing comes from over there but trouble. In 1848, a group of cardinals in Italy spoke of the church in America with pessimistic disdain. In 2025, a group of cardinals in Italy elects a son of America to the throne of St. Peter. Times have changed. A new ecclesial moment dawns for the church and for America, both of which deserve our love in respective ways. St. Thomas Aquinas details this in his treatise on the Ten Commandments, that the fourth commandment to honor your father and mother includes a proper love for one's country. That's why the word patriotism comes from the Latin word for father. Patriotism, patris, paternal. Further, in the New Covenant, the fourth commandment takes on another dimension of even greater significance, inviting us to honor our church as mother. Holy Mother Church, emblematic of our Holy Mother Mary, such that all that can be said of the Virgin Mary can be said of the church, most especially of what we call the church triumphant, that is the church in heaven, where she is pure, perfect, immaculate, and radiant in beauty beyond our imagination. As we stand in relation to this Heavenly Mother, part of that relationship is our national identity. That's why you've perhaps heard France referred to as the eldest daughter of the church. We face Holy Mother Church as her American children. America is one of her much younger children. Yet as Pope Leo's pontificate signals, America is a child who has finally come of age. And America has now followed her older siblings by partaking in the sacred Petrine Office, and so too has our moment come to make our own contributions to Holy Mother Church in the domain of sacred art, including that of classical sacred music. To present her a gift that is distinctly our own, which brings us to one of the founding principles of Angelico, that the greatest sacred art always reflects the culture of its birth. You see Notre Dame Cathedral of Paris and you know it's from medieval France. You see Michelangelo's sculptures and you know it's from the Italian Renaissance. There's no mistaking it. The art silently shouts its culture at you. And now an American Catholic patrimony is called for, to lead us into a new age. Because in our Father's providence, during this, the 21st century, America is the best equipped Western nation by size, by resources, by education, by resistance against secularization, to continue the lineage of sacred art, including that of classical sacred music. And that presents us with the central mission of Angelico Sacred Music, to create and define a new genre of sacred music, which we call American Neo-Renaissance polyphony, a unique gift to the church that is unmistakably from the land we call home. Much could be said to explain the term American Neo-Renaissance polyphony, but I'll break it down in the most simple points. First, it's polyphony, which, as Brina and Claire described, means that you have several parts weaving in and out of each other very beautifully. It imitates the style of the church's great composers of the Renaissance age. Second, neo-Renaissance. That means we combine contemporary music theory, including that of American innovators in choral composition, with older classical and Renaissance music theory of Mozart, Palestrina, and the other historic greats. And then we have our national identity, American. This music is distinctly American, first in its English lyrics, which is necessary, because in disciplines such as poetry and choral music, language is a central expression of the culture that the art comes from. But even more so, this music is distinctly American because we combine music theories from various nations, utilizing the beautiful basics of the Roman Renaissance, the dissonance developed by the 20th century Polish composers suffering under communism and fascism, the Middle Eastern modes sung in the Holy Land for countless generations, and the ethereal evolutions of contemporary Western music theory made during the most recent decades. This combination is ASM's trademark of American Neo-Renaissance polyphony, because what more beautifully rises to the height of the great American ideal than by taking the best of many different cultures and blending them together to create something that is beautiful and new. Now, on from American identity to the second subject of this framework, which is Catholic identity. What does it mean to approach sacred art from a Catholic perspective? A good place is to start by simply looking at the word Catholic. You've perhaps heard that the word Catholic means universal, and in fact it does. But if we look at it more specifically, the word Catholic comes from the two Greek words kata, holos, according to the whole. And to create art according to the whole of the church means I'm looking outward at the church, present in others, and upward towards the church triumphant in heaven. It's an ecclesia-centric model, a church-centric model, very different than a liberal postmodern philosophy of art, which operates on an egocentric model. So here we are, creating new art, looking outward, looking upward, kata holos, creating art according to the whole. Here's our problem. Right now, the sacred music landscape isn't whole. There's a gap. A big gap. For example, there was no English polyphonic setting of Our Father, or the Act of Contrition, or the Eucharistic Prayer until Angelico premiered it with Notre Dame, You Mary, and CUA. And the same can still be said for dozens of other prayers that we are very familiar with, some of which we even know by heart. It's just not there. And it's not a niche, esoteric gap. It's a fairly clear one. And the way we fill this gap with a Catholic approach is by taking a philosophy that orients us towards the whole, by looking back towards the tradition of sacred music, and also looking forward to see where we are going to continue the line of living artistic tradition. We can easily observe that this truly Catholic approach is what the greats in the artistic tradition have always taken. Whether we consider Michelangelo's sculptures, Da Vinci's paintings, Palestrina's Roman Renaissance music, we see the art flow forth from a philosophy of looking both ways, reverencing the tradition, yet adding something new. Creating art not by reinventing the wheel on one hand, nor by the opposite extreme of just hitting copy-paste on what's already been done, but truly taking an approach that is according to the whole, kata holos, considering both aspects and adding a development to the tradition as it exists. One more point though, on what it means to have a truly Catholic philosophical approach to creating art, and that point is this. As I said before, liberal postmodernism operates on a lens that is egocentric, centered on the person of the artist. Catholic sacred art should be ecclesia-centric, church-centric, Christ-centric, created in respect to the whole, directing listeners' attention outside of themselves to eternal things, and also doing so with reverence to other parts of the whole. Within the sacred music landscape, there are other ministries, choirs, organizations that focus on Gregorian chant, on Latin polyphony, on hymns, even praise and worship music. And as we pursue Angelico's mission of advancing American Neo-Renaissance polyphony, our relation to these groups is not one of adversarial competition. On the contrary, the aim of American Neo-Renaissance polyphony is a unitive one, to present a charism that brings us together, reverencing the contributions of the other parts of the whole within the church. In no saint's biography will you ever find a man who starts a new religious order and says, this is better than everything in the tradition that came before me. All the monks need to break their vows and join my religious order. That's not how Jesus operates. That's not how lasting charisms in the church come to life. The Catholic novelist Louis de Wohl paints this perfectly in his historical fiction biography of St. Francis of Assisi. Toward the end of Francis's life, as the Franciscan order begins flourishing, he crosses paths with St. Dominic, who just 6 years later started his own religious order. And after many years, these figures have heard of each other, heard of their fame, which has shaken medieval Europe, which has transformed the medieval church, and they encounter each other, and one wonders, what do they have to say? But Francis walked towards Dominic not with a spirit of competition, but with a truly Catholic spirit of love. And he goes over to Dominic, places his hand on his shoulder, and says, "You and I must be allies. You and I must be allies." And that brings us back to relationship. Relationship according to the whole, relationship with artistic groups and movements past and present, and lastly, our relationship to Holy Mother Church as her American children, presenting to her in relationship a new flavor of art, distinct from those of our older siblings in the church, and this we call American Neo-Renaissance polyphony, a gift from the world's most universal nation to history and eternity's one universal church. God bless our church, and God bless our dear home, the United States of America. Thank you.